Good evening, everyone. Shalin, I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, Amish bhai.
Okay.
Yes, Amish
Okay.
bhai. Ekdam.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all on the second query session of our section by section analysis of GST. This is our second query session. I welcome Avinash sir on this auspicious occasion of Akshay Tritiya also. Sir, सबसे बड़ी बात एक चीज मैं आज कहना चाहूंगा कि हम जब भी क्वेरी एनालाइज करते हैं तो हमें एक चीज नोटिस किया है कि बिफोर राइटिंग ए क्वेरी वी विल रिसीव द ग्रेटिट्यूड ऑल द टाइम्स। और सबसे बड़ी ये चीज जो हम मानते हैं कि किसी भी वक्ता के लिए सबसे बड़ी चीज होती है उसके श्रोताओं का प्यार, और हमें हर क्वेरी के पहले कुछ ना कुछ ग्रेटिट्यूड मिला है, तो ये हमारे लिए भी एक बहुत बड़ा लर्निंग है और हम इसके लिए हम आप सबके आभारी हैं। और इसीलिए अविनाश सर ने भी डिसाइड किया है कि वो एक नया कोर्स लॉन्च करेंगे जिसका अनाउंसमेंट भी आज होगा क्वेरी सेशन के अंदर। अविनाश सर, मैं इसके लिए आपको हैंड ओवर करता हूँ आगे के लिए, प्लीज।
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I would like to welcome each one of you on this query session of our 31-day GST refresher course. It is indeed a great privilege and honor for all of us, the entire team of mine, who have been working day in, day out for making this refresher course successful. We have received a lot of queries as I've already said earlier also, that we have received ample queries which certainly is not going to be completed within this time limit what we have. But what we assure is we'll be referring back, we'll be replying back to all the queries, whatever we have received, and all the queries will be sent back in written replies to all the participants who are attending this course. Yes, it's a auspicious day today. It's Akshay Tritiya, and as I've committed, we are going to announce the course which is in relation to the case analysis, case law analysis, because that is something which is now left behind after the section by section completion, because we are intending to complete sections, rules, notifications, and circulars. So circulars videos are already on, so we are doing that, and now we are focusing on the next level, that will be the case analysis. So we'll be doing the case analysis part now, wherein some of the relevant cases which have been pronounced finally by the honorable courts under GST regime, whereas some of the landmark judgments of indirect taxes of the prior regime, maybe VAT, maybe service tax, maybe excise, will be covering that. We'll be analyzing all those judgments, and if there are allied laws to be referred, we'll be trying to refer the allied laws also along with that. So that will be an exhaustive discussion on the case law, and we are intending to start that from 1st of May 2020, from 1st of May 2020, and the timings will be in the morning. Maybe it will be 10 to 11 or 10:30 to 11:30. We'll be fixing, and we'll be informing to each of the participants. Again, I would like to say that we'll be issuing a brochure for that, one pager for that. Along with that, the Google page will be that. Whosoever is interested in attending that, you can fill up that form, and then certainly we'll start the course. Now, another announcement that I would like to make today is that we are changing the time for next 1 week, and the time will be not from 6:30 to 6 to 8 p.m. Now it will be from 5 to 7 p.m. I'm repeating, from tomorrow we are changing the time of this particular series, GST refresher course, and from tomorrow it is going to be 5 to 7 p.m. Not from 6 to 8 p.m. It is going to be 5 to 7 p.m. So please be clear about it, and from tomorrow you will be meeting me, and we'll be meeting to you, all of you, from 5 p.m. onwards, and we'll be discussing the next chapter from 5 p.m. tomorrow. So these were two announcements. Then again we are receiving a lot of as mentioned by Amish bhai, that we are receiving a lot of appreciations, lot of messages, lot of recorded messages. So I'm really thankful to each one of you. It's a certainly an overwhelming response, and it's a matter of pride for all of us that you are liking this series that we have started, and you are appreciating our efforts. To be very honest, certainly these efforts have been taken for my learning. It's not that I'm here to make you aware about GST. You all are learned enough. You all are already having the knowledge of GST. I had a self-interest into this, a selfish motto, wherein I wanted to revise GST, and I wanted all of us to read GST once again from the scratch, section wise, and get the entire feel of GST like a new law. So that was the intention, and I'm really happy that all of you are learning along with me, and we are learning together and learning this very vast law. Now, please be prepared for the next series that we are starting from 1st May. That series, again, let me be very clear. It will be 2 days a week. We'll be doing 2 days, probably Friday and Monday. Friday and Monday of every week we'll be doing this series. It will be around 15 to 16 sessions, and we'll try to cover minimum 50 cases. And if we take the references of the cases which have been quoted there, then it will be around 150 cases. So we'll try to discuss all those cases, try to find out the guidelines, find out the meaning of various interpretations to be done, and lots of things that will certainly help each one of us in our day-to-day life so far as GST compliance or any indirect tax compliance is concerned. I had a bad throat, as well as I am not well today. I'm running from migraine. So because of that, I have requested my partner, CA Ashu Dalmia, to be available today. I hope he will be joining in few minutes, and he will be there with us to address the queries of all of you. Along with him, I am certainly there, but due to the extreme level of migraine, I am not finding myself to be in the best of the what I can say, best of the possibilities to answer all the queries. But Ashu will certainly join us, and he will be helping each one of us. He again is a GST expert and a very well-known name across the country. By the time he joins, I would request the team, by the time Ashubai joins, once Ashubai joins, let me know. By the time he joins, let us start the discussions on the queries. And one more announcement, that there are certain queries at the time of analysis of the queries. We have received around, let me share, we have received around 1,000 queries from day one, not in this batch, but from day one, like the day one of this GST refresher course, we have received around 1,000 queries. Some of the queries
Sorry
around,
to interrupt you, sir.
yeah,
टोटल फर्स्ट क्वेरी सेशन के वक्त हमारे पास 423 क्वेरी थी, 423 क्वेरीज, एंड
okay,
उसके बाद से अभी तक की नेक्स्ट क्वेरीज आर 978 मोर क्वेरीज,
oh,
978.
means around 1,500 queries we have received.
यस सर, एंड व्हाट वी आर डूइंग इज, आज के जैसे जो क्वेरी सेशन में है, अगर एक बंदे ने मल्टीपल क्वेरीज पूछी है तो हमने उसकी मैक्सिमम 2 क्वेरी ही रखी है, उससे ज्यादा फिर बाकी सबकी क्वेरी रखी है, उसकी नेक्स्ट क्वेरी स्किप की है ताकि दूसरे भी सबको चांस मिले.
Fair enough. So as the team has already said, Shalin has already informed you all that we have received 1,500 queries. I was of the belief that 1,000 ही मिले, लेकिन यहाँ तो 1,500 है. So we have covered 100 queries around in last time, and we are expecting that we'll be covering around 70 to 100 queries today also. And I have already assured that rest of the queries are certainly going to be replied back to each one of you. You will be having a compilation. You will be having a compilation of around 1,500, or maybe by the completion of this course we'll be receiving another 1,000 queries. So we'll be having at least 2,500 to 3,000 queries, and you will be getting a entire compilation of 3,000 queries, which is going to be a very handy compilation to each one of you. So that can be again a great achievement for the team and myself, that we will be in a position to answer around 3,000 queries to our participants. Let us start. By the time Ashu Bhai joins, let us start. I'll try to answer, and I'll try to reply back to the queries which ever is put in front of me. So the team can start. The queries is
Okay.
in on the screen.
Okay. The first query regarding levy and collection of taxes. Can you give illustration for undivided shares in goods?
See, basically the term undivided share is basically used in that case wherein there are joint owners. Like in case of, let me put an example which will be very easy to understand. Like in case of sale of flats, although I agree and appreciate that this is not goods, but just for the sake of making you aware and providing an illustration that there is a case of sale of flats. So in that case, if on a land 1,000 flats are constructed, then those 1,000 flats and the 1,000 flat owners, when the builder or the developer is transferring the ownership of the flats to the flat holders, he is also entering into a deed of transfer of immovable property wherein he sell the undivided share of land to all the flat owners. यानी अगर लेट्स से 1,000 स्क्वायर फीट 1,000 फ्लैट्स का अगर कोई प्रोजेक्ट है, वो प्रोजेक्ट को अगर बिल्डर सप्लाई करता है, सेल करता है, तो 1,000 के 1,000 लोगों को वो जितना भी लैंड है उसका वो अनडिवाइडेड शेयर जो है उसका वो उनके नाम पे करेगा जो ओनर्स हैं. So that is undivided share. In case of goods, there can be joint ownership of any goods, wherein you cannot divide the share of those goods. So that will be undivided share as per me.
Next. Next query is in section 2/49, the definition of family state for the word dependent. How to legally prove that the person of a family is dependent or not?
The question is rightly asked, and it is a very valid question because at times it becomes very difficult for us to establish whether the person whom we are considering as our family member or within the definition of family for the purposes of this act is really a dependable person or a person who is dependent on me or not. Now, when I say that the act per se specifies that grandparents or parents or brother or sister if dependent. So by dependent, I would simply say that if you are in a position to prove that they do not have any source of revenue, or they are not engaged in any business or making any supplies, or there is an age factor, or maybe there are some other factors because of which they are totally dependent on your capabilities and your earnings or your resources, then certainly I would like to say that you will be in a position to establish that the word dependent or the person is dependent on you. Otherwise, yes, I also believe that it becomes at times very subjective. It becomes at times very subjective and very difficult to say and prove who is dependent and who is not dependent. So that will again depend on facts and circumstances of the cases. But prima facie and primarily, I would say that if you are in a position to prove that the person who is referred as a dependent person is not in his capacity to work individually or make any supply, then in that case you can say that the person is dependent on you. This is my view. We can
Next.
discuss on this for longer period also, but because of the paucity I'll not be able to discuss. But when we will be replying back in return, you will find some examples also there. We'll be mentioning some examples also. It will be a properly research kind of compilation wherein you will find the replies of everything along with the illustrations or the case laws or some sections, something like that you will be finding. That is my assurance. I cannot assure that even immediately after the completion of this series you will get it. It may take 1 month also, but you will get, that is for sure. Yes, next.
Okay. Next query, sir. Hello, sir. in notification 66/2017 applicable for TOS of goods under RCM?
Is notification number 66 66/2017 applicable for time of
17.
supply of goods under RCM? First and foremost, I'm very sorry to say this is an ocean in which we are dealing, and I'm also a human being, so I cannot remember what is mentioned in 66/2017. So I believe that I'll not be in a position to answer this question, because I need to first know what is 66/2017, and then only I will be in a position to answer it. I will not wish to take any kind of risk and any kind of interpretation issues. So let me refer it once, 66/2017, and then I'll get back to the reply whether it is applicable in time of supply of goods under RCM or not. But I feel, so far as I remember, it is applicable only in case of services. But still, I'm not sure. I will have to refer it back. Once I refer, I will get back to you.
Next query, sir.
Yeah.
This is regarding, please throw a light on applicable of GST on an income of a YouTuber, blog writer, etc., where their income generates globally, depend on views, clicks, etc. in the following two scenarios. The first is YouTuber resides in India and having a total gross revenue less than 20 lakhs. And second one is YouTuber is Indian citizen residing outside India, files an income tax return in India and having a gross revenue more than 20 lakhs.
See, so far as my awareness is concerned, YouTuber or blog writer is using a platform on which they are writing or they are recording, like we are also recording and uploading our videos on YouTube. So there is a mechanism which has been provided by the owners of YouTube. Now they might be residing in US or some other country. There is a concept under section 14 of the IGST Act which says online information and data access and retrieval system. So for that, the livability has been decided. If those services are being used in India, like you are saying, the views and clicks can be globally, it can be from anywhere, but we are concerned only with the Indian jurisdiction. And therefore, if somebody who is not registered and he clicks on that video and views that, then the company will be liable for the payment of tax under GST. That is for the platform owner, like YouTube owner, or the platform on which the blog is being written. Now when you are asking the same question for a person like, let's say me, who is earning X income from the videos that he is uploading or I am uploading on YouTube, for me this is a provision of service, and therefore I would say that certainly that income or that supply value will be received and will be taxable in the country India, and the leviability will be as per the provisions of GST law. So first question you have asked is, you have tuber resides in India and having gross total income less than 20 lakhs. No worries, if it is less than 20 lakhs, still you will have to see that this becomes a supply which is a interstate supply, and therefore the livability of tax will arise. But since there is a deferment under the clause under section 24 that mandatory registration is required, if your income is less than, or if your receipts, the total receipts, that is aggregate turnover, is less than 20 lakhs, then certainly you are out of this regime and you are not supposed to pay GST. Second question is, YouTuber is an Indian citizen resident residing out of India, files an income tax return in India and having gross revenue. See, he is resident or not, that is nowhere concerned. As per me, that is nowhere concerned. You will have to see what is the place of supply and what is the location of the supplier, because we have not covered those sections. We are yet to cover. If the location of the supplier and the place of supply both are within the same state, it becomes intrastate. Otherwise it is an interstate supply. Now in this situation, you are saying that the person is residing outside India, meaning thereby his location is outside India, and then he is making certain supplies from there. He is uploading his videos or he is writing the blogs. Then as per me, even if he is taxable for his income tax in India, But for GST, that taxability will again depend on whether he is whether he is exporting the services. In case he is exporting the services to India, then the person who is importing it, he will be liable under reverse charge, and not the person who is residing outside India. So therefore, in sum and substance, both the answers, like first answer would be, if he is in India having less than 20 lakhs the revenue, then in that case, as per me, the taxability will not arise. Two, it will not arise only because the exception or the deferment is given there. Two, in case whether where he is an Indian citizen but residing out of India, the taxability will not arise, even if he has the taxability of more than 20 lakhs so far as income tax is concerned. Because in GST, we'll have to first identify the nature of supply, whether it is taxable or not, and if it is taxable, then whether it is intrastate or interstate. Once that is determined, then only we'll have to find out the taxability in the country.
Next queries. Is taxability of a person registered in earlier UTs of DND and DNNH during the transition period, whether they should have charges CG plus UT or IG in the transactions among these two UTs. Read the notification related to this, but not clear. What is a remedy now if charged wrong?
Just a minute. The question which is put in front of me, which I believe is, they are writing taxability of person registered in earlier UTs of DND, that is Daman and Diu, I believe, and Dadra and Daman and Nagar Haveli, something like that. Correct? During the transition period. So you were registered in earlier regime in those UTs. Now whether they should have charges CGST and UT or IGST in transactions among these two UTs. Read the notification related to this, but not clear. What is remedy now if charged wrong? See, if it is wrongly charged, then there is a remedy of section 77, wherein you can pay the right tax and take the wrongly availed or wrongly collected tax back as a refund. I'm repeating again. So far as your question is concerned, if you have charged wrongly, that means IGST charge karna tha, C or UT GST charge kar liya, ya vice versa. So in that case, the only remedy as per me would be section 77. Section 77 provides कि जो आपने गलत चार्ज करके भर दिया, उसको आप रहने दें, पहले आप सही को भरें और गलत को आप रिफंड दे दें. So that will be the remedy in your case.
Next.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Asu sir is also online now.
Okay.
Okay.
Ashu bhai, I welcome you in this query session of ours, and I have already mentioned about you in this session that because of my health you are now joining this, and you are there to support and guide the participants. Although I think so, I welcome Ashu bhai on this query session, and I will be requesting the team to ask the queries now, to continue asking the queries, and we can deal the queries alternate wise, like we can deal on alternate basis. This query can be dealt with Ashu bhai also. Yeah.
Okay. The query is regarding apportion of credit and block credits. The query is for the purpose of reversal of ITC under Rule 42-43 of CGST rules, whether aggregate turnover includes exempt turnover, meaning thereby whether to reverse proportionate ITC if any registered person has earned bank interest on his savings bank account in his individual name.
I'm taking Yunash.
Yeah, please take.
Okay. Basically, when we talk about aggregate turnover, exempt supply is included into that. There is no doubt about it. But when we go to the extension of question, I have a saving bank account and I have interest on that. So I have a doubt whether that will be turnover or that will be supply or not as it is. and when it is not the supply, or it is not the part of the, because that is my personal saving bank account, and interest on that portion I think is not the part of at all for the purpose of rule 42, 43. Apart from that, if we go to the explanation to section 43, that is very clear when we talk about the interest, FD interest and all that, that is not included for the purpose of rule 42 and 43.
Okay, next query, sir. The next query is regarding value of taxable supply. In circular number 47/2018, serial number 2 says, where there is a servicing of a car and bill indicates value of goods and services separately, GST will be charged separately for goods and services. However, won't it be a composite supply attracting rate of principal supply?
I think at the time of discussion, when we were discussing this composite supply, section 8, I have given an example also, wherein I have said that there is a dilemma and there is a confusion still which is prevailing in the market, whether the composite supply has to be determined on the value of supply, on the basis of value of supply, or on the basis of intention of the service recipient. So I've given also an example of repair of car, like I have sent my car for the purpose of repair, and the bill for repairing and or the servicing is 10,000 rupees, wherein the parts which are being replaced is the value of those parts is 2 lakh rupees, and the tax rate which is applicable on those parts is 28%, whereas the tax rate which is applicable on services is 18%. So what will be the answer? So at that time also, now since Ashubai also there, will be adding to his views also, but my view, I was very clear that I need to see the intention. I was sending, or I had sent the vehicle for the purpose of recovery, the supply of service. Now when service was being rendered, the person who was providing services came to know that there are certain parts which are damaged, and therefore those parts needs to be repaired or it needs to be replaced. I opted for the replacement of the parts. Now since the parts are replaced, it becomes not the principal supply. The principal supply as per me will be the supply of service, and therefore it needs to be charged at the rate of 18%. And certainly, yes, the answer to this query is certainly it is going to be a composite supply. Even if you are mentioning the it used to happen in case of VAT and service tax, wherein we were mentioning the goods value separately, apply VAT on that, and the services value separately and apply service tax on that. But in case of GST, it is certainly a composite supply. It will fall under section 8, and therefore you will have to identify which is the principal supply and apply the rate accordingly. That is my view. If I will be requesting Ashubai to add his view.
Yeah, see, basically I will divide into this query to two parts. Number one, what should be done, and number two, what is a legal thing? Because when we talk about the circular, obviously circular is not binding to us, but the revenue authorities will be taking their stand as per the circular. That is very sure. I think Avinash will also vouch that thing. Court will take the stand, different stand, that is a different part. So practically, if I take what I have to see whether I want to go for the litigation or not. That's the first thing. I am talking from the practical point of view. If you see the legal stand is very clear. I am going for a servicing where the liquid, where the oil is changed, some parts are changed, where I was not the intention was of the service, it will fall into the composite supply. But suppose my tire is burst and I'm going for the tire, exchange the tire, my intention is to exchange the tire, then it is a good of supply of goods. But the circular is not bifurcating in that way. It is always saying you can bifurcate, bill it separately and do that thing. So I think that circular is not legally tenable in all the cases. But in practical scenario, what I understand, revenue will be taking the stand, revenue will be deciding the factors, revenue will be taking the determination, the demands on the basis of this circular. So what I personally feel, from the practical point of view, if I am not in position to go for the litigation, I may follow this circular, but the legal position what the Avinash Bhai has told, I agree with that.
Okay.
Okay. And next query. This is regarding compulsory registration in certain cases. As per my understanding, GST is applicable and a person has to take a compulsory registration in case he exports software outside India through internet, which is developed by him in India. But many more people are of the view that registration is not required as their gross revenue is less than threshold limit 20 lakhs. Please clarify and guide us.
See, for that purpose, basically, first I have to section 9 and section 22. Section 22 talks about threshold limit of 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs for the purpose of service and goods. Section 24 says if it is an interstate supply of goods, you have to take the compulsory registration. And if we talk about the levy section, section 9, it is always a levy on the either of the interstate supply or interstate supply. When I talk about exports, it is an interstate supply, no doubt. But there was a notification in 2017, 65 by 2017, where the interstate supply up to 20 lakhs was also exempted for taking the registration. That means the original scheme of the law was even you are making the interstate supply of services, even for a single rupees, you are liable for the registration under the GST law. But because of the 65 by 2017 notification, that exemption and the interstate supply up to 20 lakhs are not required to take the registration. So what I feel, legally you are not required to take the registration, but what will happen because of this transaction, because of this way, you will be losing your ITC or certain things. The benefit of exports you will not be able to take if you are not taking the registration. If the Avinash bhai want to add something.
No, I will agree with this. I will agree with this, that they may not be required to take registration, but if they do not take registration, then they will certainly add up to their cost, and they will not be in a position to get the refunds of the taxes that they have paid in case of inputs or input services.
Okay, next queries. This is regarding eligibility and conditions for taking ITC. Sir, in case of imports, it is necessary to receive goods or merely bill of entry and custom challan showing payment of IGST enough to avail ITC. Kindly guide with relevant provision.
When we read the provision, that is section 16 subsection 2, it simply says that you can claim ITC on the basis of these 4 conditions, satisfaction of the 4 conditions. Out of those 4 conditions, one of the conditions is you must have received the goods or services. To my belief and up to my understanding, the bill of entry and the custom challan is not going to be sufficient. He needs to show that he has received the goods, or rather the imports have actually been to his place. That condition he will have to satisfy, otherwise he will not be in a position to claim the credit. Because there can be a number of situations wherein, like, he might have sold before entering into the station, customs station, he might have sold जिसको बोलते हैं हाई सी सेल्स कर दिया उसने, या और कोई ट्रांसफर्स कर दिए हों. So in that case, he will not be in a position to claim the credit. But yes, if it is billed to ship to, the goods have reached to the customs station, and from there he has supplied to someone else, and the bill has been issued from there his place, then certainly the credit can be given. This is my view.
Okay, next. If a supplier raises an invoice of a supply of services which spreads across the financial year, whether based on explanation under section 13.2, there is a deemed supply can be relied upon for receipt of services satisfied section 16.2b, receipt of service for the purpose of ITC.
Basically, what I understand, there are 2 separate provisions. Section 13 is regarding time of supply when the tax has to be paid. Section 13 explanation, what is in the question is very clear. When I have raised an invoice and whatever the value is covered into invoice, that is deemed to be provided for the purpose of providing the supply services. But section 16 is very specific. You can take the ITC only when you receive the services. So I think the deeming provision of section 13 cannot be applied to the section 16, number 1. But here the practical challenge will come, because I have a restriction, I have a time limit for taking the ITC also. Because let's say I have raised and I got the invoice in financial year, let's say on 26 April 2020, that is for 3 years of services. on the one hand, I have to pay the output tax on that invoice because of the section 13. But on the other hand, in section 16, it is very clear, unless until I receive the services, I will not be able to take a credit. So what I feel, even this is also applicable for goods, for knockdown condition goods. Suppose I have to supply the goods in lot, and my supply takes for a year. Then what the provision says, you have to raise the invoice at the first supply, and you have to take the credit when you receive the last goods, last installment of the goods, or last plot of the goods. But section 16 subsection 4 provides the limit, you cannot take the credit after September or the annual filing of annual return, whichever is date. So I think there is a gap in the law somewhere, where on the one side the tax has to be paid initially at the time of raising the invoice, but the credit is restricted when you actually receive the goods. So what I feel, these two connection, section 13 reference or deeming provision cannot be applied to section 16, and there is some gap into the law from that perspective. What the Vinash bhai, if you have some view of that?
Correct.
Okay, we are moving to the next query, sir. Next query is, what will be entry in books if goods are received on 2/4/2020 and invoiced issue on 31st/3/2020? ITC will be claimed in 2/4/2020, but whether it will be entered in a books in March? If yes, then how the reconciliation of 2A be made as financial year changes?
The first question is pertaining to the date of invoice as well as the receipt of goods. Like on 31st March 2020, the invoice was raised, wherein I have received the goods on 2nd of April. The only difference which will arise here is in case of credit availability. Like what will happen, there can be a scenario wherein for the month, let's say for the month of March, the 2A will be reflecting the credit, whereas since I have not received the goods, I will be taking the credit in the month of April. Now, because GSTR 2 and GSTR 3 are not there, or 38 or 39 is not complied as it was perceived originally, there is an issue. But that manual, I can only say that you'll have to do the reconciliation manually. So far as accounting is concerned, the accounting will be continued as it is. Like on 31st March, you have received the invoice, or the invoice was issued, you will book that accordingly. For the purpose of credit, the credit also will be booked accordingly, but that will become an eligible credit. The credit will not be availed till April. So once you receive the goods, thereafter you can change that account, or you can transfer that entry from the eligible credits to the availed credits. That is what I can say from the accounting point of view, because I'm not very good in compliance. So I'll be requesting Ashubhai also to add something. But technically, I don't think that there is going to be any problem so far as accounting is concerned. It's only and only because of the reasons of section 16 subsection 2 that the restriction is there. And since he is receiving in the next month, the credit will be eligible in the next month, and it can be very simply and very easily reconciled. Ashubhai can add something.
Perfectly, Avinash bhai, I totally agree. I will add one point here. Because now after implementation of GST, our books of accounts and GST reconciliation has to be there compulsorily in all cases in 9 or 9C, whatever it may be. So what I will one point, our notes to accounts to the financial statement should be very strong. Why I am saying it should be very clear what is our accounting policy to recognize the revenue. See, for the GST purpose, when the ITC has to be taken, when the revenue, when the GST turnover will be counted, the law is very clear. But what is the accounting policy? That should be written in your notes to accounts, so that tomorrow when the department comes on, we should have evidence in our hand that we have written in the accounting policy and we have done according. That's one addition I wanted to make.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Ashuji. Next question, sir.
I think we need to skip this question because this is pertaining to place of supply, and place of supply is yet to be covered. So let us wait for the completion of this.
No,
and then we'll cover.
it is related to registration also. If you want to go further, it is for the registration.
Is it for registration? Then you can move. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm reading the.
Amish. Yeah.
I'm reading the. Companies registered in Gujarat and having one property in Mumbai where company is not registered, that is Mumbai. The Mumbai property is given on rent to a person who is registered in a Mumbai. Service provider is in Gujarat, service recipient in Mumbai, and place of supply in Mumbai. No other income is generated from Mumbai. Do I have to take registration in Mumbai, or I can charge IGST as my business establishment in Gujarat?
This thing has been done. Avinash, can I take up the question?
Yeah,
This is
please,
covered up?
please. Yeah, continue.
Basically, there are two concepts into GST, and that has not to confuse. One is the location of supplier, and second is the place of supply. My registration is governed by location of supplier, from where I am providing the services. That becomes very important. So location of supplier is technically is the location from where the services are being provided. It is not necessarily being location of the property. I think I can bifurcate into this query two part, where one of the properties like that is a shopping mall. In that I have a full-fledged office there, maintenance staff is there, my staff is there, from where they are operating the mall, and I have given the shops on rent. In that situation, the things become different because I am controlling that property from that location. But in this question, what I feel, there is only property. You have no other establishment there, no other place there in Mumbai. So what I understand, there is no requirement to take registration if only property is required is situated. You don't have any fixed place of business there. You don't have any office there, then you are not required to take the registration there, and you can charge IGST. And now the question arises: what tax has to be charged? On that basis, your location of supplier is in Gujarat, place of supply becomes in Maharashtra. Obviously, IGST can be charged in that.
I think there is a circular
Okay.
also pertaining to this, which clarifies this issue. Yeah.
Maybe I am not aware. Maybe, yeah.
Okay, we are moving to the next question. If invoice are made separately for each lot and only PO was made for consolidated order, still the credit will be eligible on delivery of last installment only?
See, just by playing with the language of law will not change the intention of the law. This is what I can say. So first and foremost, how you can prepare one PO and multiple invoices when the goods per se are sold or being sent on a knockdown situation. If the goods cannot be completed, if it cannot be made usable, then there is no point. Just for the purpose like आप 10 आइटम्स यूज होते हैं, उसमें से एक आइटम आपने एक बार बेच दिया, दूसरा दूसरी बार बेच दिया, उसका अलग से इनवॉइस बना दिया, तीसरी बार बेच दिया. I would say that may not fall within the definition of input per se, because or capital goods, because it has to be used or intended to be used in course or furtherance of business. So that single piece cannot be used because it is not usable at all. That is my view. So in that case, just by playing with the language of the law will not suffice, and you will have to raise one invoice. This is the provision in the law which is specified. You will have to raise one invoice. The copy of that invoice shall travel along with all the lots, and the final and the original copy shall travel with the final lot. And once you will receive the final installment or the last lot, then only you will be eligible for input tax credit. That is my very humble and short view, that you should not play with the words of the law, because in this case when the lots are required, see there are two kind of lots. एक होता है कि मैंने 1000 यूनिट का ऑर्डर दे दिया और बोला कि आप 5 महीने में 200 करके आप सप्लाई कर दीजिए, तो इन दैट केस the order is of 1000. GST law is nowhere concerned about the order. It is concerned with the movement of goods and the invoice thereof. So आपने 200 भेजा तो आप 200 का invoice भेजिए, there is no problem. You will be eligible for getting the credit of those 200 units that you have received and the invoice also. In that case, invoice for 1000 units is not required. But in case, let's say machinery, there are 10 different lots which have to be supplied, and then there will be an assembly. In that case, if you plan this, then it will be wrong. तो दोनों अलग अलग situations है. कौन सी situation आपकी है, that accordingly you will have to settle and understand the answer. अगर आपकी units की है, let's say independent units है, उसकी multiple orders, आपने 1000 का order ले लिया क्योंकि उसके रेट में डिस्काउंट मिल रहा था, तो आपने ले लिया और सप्लाई आपने इंस्टॉलमेंट्स में करी, तो जितनी इंस्टॉलमेंट में सप्लाई की उतनी इनवॉइसेस आप बनवा लीजिए, कोई इशू नहीं, आपको क्रेडिट मिलेगा. दैट इज माय
सोना
अशोक भाई.
लैपटॉप
So this is my view, and you will be eligible in that case only. But जहाँ पे semi knockdown या knockdown conditions में कोई machines जा रही हैं, वो lots में जा रही है, उन situations में मेरे हिसाब से आपको credit नहीं मिलता।
We are moving to the next query now. This is regarding input tax credit. Second provision of section 16 subsection 2. So with the help of which provision we can say that 18% interest is payable along with the reversal of ITC and not 24%, because there is a school of thoughts that 24% along with the reversal is required to be paid.
If I answer very shortly, then just read notification by 13/2017 along with section 50. I just explain in short. When I pay the interest under section 50, either I pay under section 50 subsection 1 or either under section 50 subsection 3. The rate of interest notified for section 50 subsection 1 wide notification 13/2017 is 18%, and for 50 subsection 3 it is 24%. 50 subsection 1 is applicable when there is a short payment of tax. The short payment of tax may be because of excess utilization of ITC, or maybe because of the short payment of tax because of you have declared short supply. So there can be any reason of that. But if we go to section 50 subsection 3, that is strictly applicable when there is a reversal of credit because of the application of section 42 and 43. That means initially the concept was of the matching of GSTR 1, 2, 3, where the ITC was to be matched with the corresponding vendors' returns and return demand for and the reconciliation, and after that there was application of section 42 and 43. As of now, section 42, 43 has not been applied till now. So, until अभी तक वो apply नहीं हुए हैं, तो in that case section 50 subsection 3 is not applicable as such in my humble opinion, and when that is not applicable, notified interest rate of section of 24% cannot be applied. That is my opinion. Avinash bhai, if you want to add something.
Correct. No, correct. And this has been discussed while discussing the provisions of the law also, that 24% की तो applicability भी है ही नहीं. There is no situation wherein 24% can be charged, because that subsection 10 of section 42 and 43 is not applicable at all.
Yeah.
Okay, now moving to the next query. Agreement between buyer and seller suggests a payment to be made after 9 months can attract the reversal of credit under proviso 2 of section 16/2.
See, let us appreciate one thing, that there are a number of judgments. Recently the judgment of Dilip Kumar, which said कि अगर आपको कोई exemption मिलता है या कोई benefit मिलता है, कोई privilege मिलता है law में, then you have to read it strictly. But I would say that we need to read. I am of this opinion that you need to read the law, entire law strictly. And the law says that if it is not paid within 180 days of the date of issuance of invoice, then you will have to reverse the credit along with interest. Even if internally you have the contract of 9 months, but as per me, the provision of the law will come in between, and therefore the reversal will be required. But let me share other view also, which as a lawyer I would like to share. When we read the wordings, it says when the recipient fails to make the payment. Now, what is failure to make the payment of tax? Failure to make the payment of tax is that you are not paying the tax as per the agreed terms. That is one interpretation which I could make. And if it is interpreted in that fashion, that it is not a failure to pay the tax, that I am not able to pay within 180 days. Actually, the terms of the contract were 9 months, and therefore I have not made the payment of tax within 180 days. If I argue and I fight on this basis, then there are chances that the court may struck down this provision. But since I have said that we need to read the law strictly, and as per now, as per the current provisions, the provision very clearly says if the recipient fails to make the payment within 180 days from the date of issuance of invoice, then in that case he is supposed to reverse the credit along with interest, and therefore you will be attracted by that provision. Let me give another insight. There is a settled principle led by the Honorable Supreme Court, wherein it has been said that if the law has been made, but the mechanism to implement that law is not provided, then that law is bad. So if you will read this provision of 180 days, second proviso to section 16 subsection 2, along with rule number 37 of the CGST rules, you will find that the reversal which was supposed to be done, which is envisaged in this particular proviso, has to be done through GSTR 2. Now, since GSTR 2 is not there, how you are going to do it? So you can also argue on that basis that the law was very clear, but the mechanism is not provided. Provide us the mechanism, we will reverse it. Since the mechanism is not there, we have not reversed. So it depends on the, what I can say, कितना हम litigate कर सकते हैं, what is the capacity we have, and accordingly we need to take the call. If it is not having the much impact, then you should reverse. एक और रास्ता जो मैं सोचता हूँ practical है, Ashu bhai will supplement or he will differ or he will add something into that. I will request, because this is very important question and many of us are like struggling in answering this question. Now another idea which I can give is, it says reversal. Now from day one you are aware that you are going to make payment in 9 months. You take the credit at day one when you have received the invoice, and same day you reverse the credit. So it is availed. You have availed the credit and you have reversed it also. So in that case 16 subsection 4 will not be made applicable to you, and therefore उसके बाद आप जब भी आप पे करते हैं 9 महीने नहीं 12 महीने के बाद तब आप क्रेडिट ले लीजिए, तो इंटरेस्ट का क्वेश्चन नहीं रहेगा. देयर विल बी नो क्वेश्चन ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. सो दिस इज व्हाट आई कैन से फॉर दिस आंसर. बट यस, अगर मैं केवल एक एकेडमिशियन के हिसाब से और एक स्टूडेंट के हिसाब से बोलूं तो यस, वी शुड रीड द लॉ वेरी स्ट्रिक्टली, एंड एज पर दैट रीडिंग you will have to reverse the credit even if you have entered into a contract that you will be paying in 9 months. That is my view. If you want to litigate, then I have already answered that you have various ways and means of doing it. Ashu bhai, you want to add something? Please add.
Yeah, I want to add one thing just to discuss from you. If we read the provision, what I am just reading the provision, what it is. Provided further, where the recipient fails to pay to the supplier of goods or services of both, other than the supplies on which tax is payable on the reverse charge basis, amount toward the value of supply along with the tax payable thereon. अगर मैं इस लॉ को स्ट्रिक्टली अगर पढ़ूं, मान लो फॉर एग्जांपल, आई टेक एन एग्जांपल, I have 1,000 rupees supply and on that 180 rupees is tax. Total value is to be paid 1,180. So this should not be when this is applicable when I have not paid the value and both.
Correct.
Suppose take the payment of 180 and I say I have made the payment of tax.
No,
make the entry accordingly.
Still it is
because
wrong.
It is saying value of supply along with the tax.
Correct. Absolutely.
That means there should not be when I made the payment of tax, there is no outstanding tax.
Correct.
There should be outstanding value and outstanding tax. So why make the payment of tax? I'm just discussing, can I come out of the section?
No, as per me, no.
Okay.
This is my, as per me, no, this is my view, because maybe therefore I said कि बहुत सारे views हैं, but मेरे हिसाब से along with tax it is written, along with the value it is written. So I need to pay 1,180 rupees. If I fail to pay 1,180 rupees, then I'm I'm covered with this provision. That is my humble submission.
Yeah, but I am agreeing with your first thing where it is very clear-cut established principle. If the mechanism to provide that thing is not available, that cannot be enforced upon me, because principally what was the thing, it will be added your tax liability into GSTR 2. That mechanism is not there, so that please also with us always.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Next query, sir. What is the meaning of shall include supplies in reverse charge?
See, when I am talking about rule 42 and 43, the meaning of exempted supply has to be taken into extended manner. What is extended manner? Exempted supply has been defined under section 2 subsection 47, that is related or section 11 supplies. But when we go for rule 42 and 43, what I perceive, exempted supply is equal to supply as per section 2 subsection 47 plus supply as per section 17 subsection 3 minus explanation to rule 43. What does it mean? कि मैं जो मेरी एग्जम्प्टेड सप्लाई है वो तो मैं लूंगा ही लूंगा, प्लस फॉर एग्जांपल आई एम डूइंग द टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज, प्लस I am doing the Kaju supply. Kaju is covered under reverse charge. So that Kaju supply will be taken as an exempted supply for the purpose of calculating the common credit reversal of Rule 42 and 43. So that will be added into exempted supply for the limited purpose of calculation of Rule 42 and 43. That is the meaning. I think that is the purpose of asking question. So basically here it will be included into my exempted supply for the purpose of calculating the reverse charge. For calculating the reversal of credits under Rule 42 and 43.
Next query: whether original tax invoice must be in possession at the time of claiming ITC, or photocopy or scan copy would serve the purpose, as it is technology time today when I am taking a credit with copy of invoice, but tomorrow if needed we can have the original. What in case of digitally signed invoice? In that case also we should have original digitally signed invoice, or there the photo or scan copy will serve the purpose?
I can give just one answer, that the law says you must have a tax invoice debit note or a document evidencing the payment of tax. You need to have that invoice or that document which is evidencing the payment of tax. You have to have that. Now, so far as original tax invoice is concerned, or ITC is concerned, say photocopy is concerned or scan copy is concerned, I would like to draw your attention to rule number 36 of the CGST rules. Rule 36 says what are the documents which are supposed to be with you for the purpose of claiming input tax credit. And 36 sub rule 1 clearly says that the document must be an invoice which is issued under rule 46. Now when I say rule 46 में 17 contents हैं, वो सारे 17 contents आपके में होने चाहिए. Then they have inserted a sub rule to this wherein they have said, एक recently notification से I think 49/2019 या 39 से they have inserted a sub rule wherein they have said कि अब आप ये केवल 5 कंटेंट्स अगर आपके इनवॉइस में रहेंगे, देन यू विल बी हैविंग अ डॉक्यूमेंट, और इट विल बी सेड टू बी अ डॉक्यूमेंट व्हिच इज एलिजिबल फॉर इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. So I don't think that if you do not have the original tax invoice, you will not be eligible for input tax credit. You will be eligible for input tax credit provided the document that you have contains the 5 elements which are specified in this rule 36 sub rule 2, I believe 2A or proviso. So that needs to be considered. अगर वो पांचों चीजें आपके में हैं तो आप ये क्रेडिट ले सकते हैं, otherwise there can be an issue. And so far as digital invoicing is concerned, the document is defined in this law, which includes the documents which are issued electronically. So therefore I believe that digital invoice also, as per the IT Act, it has to be a valid document for the purpose of claiming of credit. Anything to be added? Ashu bhai, you can add.
Yeah, only one thing although I have covered. Basically, there was amendment in Rule 40. Basically, tax invoice is covered under Rule 46. How it should be issued? What is the manner of getting the tax invoice? There is a one proviso there where, apart from digitally signed invoice or physical signed invoice, they have provided provision has been added. There can be an electronic invoice, which, as per the IT Act, that means. Correct. What is the provision provided in the IT Act? You can have the electronic invoice for that purpose. That is different from digital invoice or signed copy of the invoice. If you have complied with the provisions of the IT Act and you have the electronic invoice, that is a sufficient invoice for the purpose of Rule 46.
So digitally signed invoice means the invoice which is issued in the IT Act. I think the invoice which is embedded with digital signature. So that will be a valid document.
Basically, what I understood, what is understood in Section 46, there are 3 possible options. One is manually signed invoice, second is a digitally signed invoice, and third is an electronic invoice. That is the third part.
Okay.
Because in electronic invoice is not necessarily digitally signed, because there are certain setup process through which you have to issue the invoice.
Okay.
So that is the third type of invoice we can have.
Okay.
Next, sir, kindly explain the RCM liability of renting of motor vehicles services received.
Yeah, basically renting of motor vehicle has been made RCM taxability has been arise from 1st of October 2019. There was a circular initially 22 by 2019, which was further amended on 29th of through 29th by 2019 circular notification. What is the condition for RCM? Number one, the service has to be provided by way of renting to a body corporate. Number one, basically there are three conditions for that. Number one, the service is provided to a body corporate. Services are provided by a non-body corporate, and tax charge is not 12%. So basically, what one issue I foresee into this notification, basically when I talk about the supply of services through provision of motor vehicle or renting of motor vehicle, there are two tax rates possible: 5% without ITC or 12% with ITC. There are third category possible. Suppose I am a taxi driver or I am providing the renting of motor services. I may not be registered under GST law because I am not falling into threshold limit. So what the notification is saying, 29 by 2019, you are to pay under RCM if the invoice received is not under 12%, and services are provided by non-body corporate. Does it mean if you are receiving an invoice from an unregistered person, you have to pay under RCM? Because initially, what the initial circular was saying, because initially when the tax liability we see, either it is a 5% or 12%, but if I am not registered, I will not be charging any interest. And what the notification 29 by 2019 says, if you are not a body corporate, providing the services to a body corporate, where the invoice is not of the 12%, where the tax and interest charge is not of the 12%, then the RCM will be applicable. So clear cut, when you are providing the services, you are registered, you are taking the you are charging the interest at 5%, obviously RCM will be applicable. But the another ambiguity I think has come from that notification. If I am not registered and I am providing the services to some body corporate, what I am understanding, because of this notification, the reverse charge liabilities arising on those services also, which are from the taxi providers or the rent-a-cab service providers, which are not registered under the GST law. Avinash bhai, if you want to add something into this.
No, nothing to be added.
Next, what is the meaning of vessel in section 17 subsection 5 clause AA? Whether it will include truck and goods carriage taxi. Second part is renting of motor vehicle is now under reverse charge. Then also ITC of reverse charge is not allowed as per section 17 subclause 5B subclause 1.
So far as first question is concerned, what is the meaning of vessel? As per me, no, it will not include truck or goods carriage taxi. It is not going to be included there. And so far as second question is concerned, I think Ashu bhai has recently just answered, so I will be requesting him only to continue with this, with the second part of this question.
What was the question?
Renting of motor vehicle. Yeah.
Okay. I think there are two different things. Number one, output tax when you have to pay. There is no doubt renting of motor vehicle. If the service provider is not charging at the rate of 12% and he is not body corporate, against that you have to pay the tax under reverse charge. There is no doubt about it. But there is a restriction under section 17(5) which provides when you are availing the services of hiring of cab or rent a cab, the ITC will not be available. So what will happen? You will pay the tax under reverse charge and the ITC will not be available against that. I think that is a clarity they are asking, or anything else?
Yeah, that is the only thing.
Next question. Yeah. ITC of office furniture is available or not?
I think there is no restriction. Basically, what I have to say, ITC is not available. Something which is related to immovable property. So, in common parlance, I am talking about the office furniture, and that is not embedded into the immovable property. See, again, I have to see the nature of transaction, how it is happening. For example, I am purchasing a property where the furniture is embedded into it. That means I am purchasing a property, I am purchasing an office of, let's say, 2 crore of rupees. That is along with furniture. So what is happening in there? There I am purchasing the property itself, I am not purchasing the furniture. So in that case, there is no question of availing the ITC. But in normal scenario, when I am purchasing the office furniture, which is not embedded into my property, I think there is no restriction to avail the ITC in that scenario. Avinash bhai?
Correct. Agreed.
Next, what is the difference of the wording other than plant and machinery in section 17 subsection 5 clause C and other than plant or machinery in section 17 subsection 5 clause D? Second, what is the meaning of on his own account in section 17 subsection 5 clause D? As per language of section 17 subsection 5 clause D, repairs to building and renovation of ITC is allowed.
Sir, I would like to answer this question very simply, like 17.5C and 17.5D. These two subsections or subclauses are dealing with, one with works contract and two with construction, respectively. Now, for both the things, works contract has been defined under clause 119 of section 2, which is now applicable. There are 12 terms which are there included, like construction, repair, maintenance, everything, renovation, fitting out, and all those terms. And they have said that this will be in relation to immovable property, then only it is going to be a works contract. So what does 17.5C provides? It says that if you are availing the services of works contract, it means in relation to immovable property, and the word which is used there is construction, and the word which is used there in 17.5C is construction. And in case of 17.5D, it says that if you are constructing an asset which is to be utilized on his own account, meaning thereby the person who is doing it, the person who is getting the construction done, he is going to utilize for his own purpose, like for his own official purpose. Factory building बना रहा है या कोई office shed बना रहा है, which is going to be used for his business purpose, then also the credit shall not be allowed, meaning thereby it is overriding section 16 subsection 1, wherein it is said that you will be allowed to claim the credit or avail the credit in case it is used or intended to be used for your business, in course or furtherance of your business. Now in this case, even if it is to be used for the purpose who is constructing it on his own account, then also the credit shall not be allowed. That is one thing which has been intended. Secondly, when we read the definition of construction, which is provided as an explanation after 17.5C and D, it clearly says that it includes repair, maintenance, renovation, everything is included, but the credit shall be blocked only when the amount is capitalized. If the amount is not capitalized, then in that case the credit shall be allowed even for those cases. Moving further, the another question is pertaining to plant and machinery. Now friends, plant and machinery has been again defined in the same section, wherein it includes certain things and it excludes certain things. जहाँ पे आप बाहर pipeline लगाते हैं तो exclude कर दिया गया है. So there are certain exclusions, but the plant and machinery per se is included only for the reason that plant and machinery, even if it is constructed, it will be not falling within the blockage of credits. The credits will be allowed if the investment, if the input or the capital goods are with relation to plant and machinery. That is the only intention. Otherwise, so far as my knowledge or my reading is concerned, there is no other restriction for plant and machinery. Again, I would sum up: 17.5C, 17.5D, both are for construction. C is for works contract, D is for construction, which can be as a builder also, which can be as a businessman also, your own office, your own factory, that is included in 17.5D. Construction terms per se includes repair, maintenance, renovation, everything provide, and the credit is not blocked if it is not capitalized. Own his own account, I have already clarified, and repair maintenance, it is part of construction definition and therefore it is allowed, provided it is not capitalized. Anything to be added? Ashu bhai, you can add.
No, perfectly correct, sir.
Yeah, next question, Amit bhai.
Yes, sir. Next
Yes,
query. If in case of construction contract of road, main contractor A appoints B as subcontractor, subcontractor B procures material on his own name, whether ITC will be available on such procurements to subcontractor B?
Basically, what we have to understand, there are two restrictions related to this in section 17 subsection 5. One is in clause C, one is in clause D. C is a restriction when I am taking the service for any works contractor. That means properties of mine and I am taking the works contract services, then I cannot take the credit. But if the works contractor use the service of another works contractor, then the work contractor can take the credit. That is the first restriction. That is not linked with that question. Second restriction is, that is section 17 subsection 5 clause D. Understand with an example. I am making a property. If I make it property through works contractor, that is restricted under section 17 subsection 5. The another way will be, I do not outsource that property construction work. I do not give it to the works contractor. I take the labors and I purchase a material, different material, whatever required, and I construct the property. Then section 17(5)(d) restricts such type of inputs where I'm purchasing for making my own property. Then those goods or input services are not allowed to be taken as a credit for the purpose of making the immovable property. Kindly appreciate, these restrictions are applicable only to the person to whom the property belongs. These restrictions are not applicable to the person who is providing the services to the owner of the property. That means the restrictions are not applicable to the works contractor. What is meaning of this? If the works contractor is purchasing the goods to provide the services, or works contractor is availing the services to provide the services, the restriction of clause 17(5) are not applicable to the works contractor for that purpose. So a straightforward answer in this question, subcontractor purchasing the goods, if they are not falling into other categories of section 17(5), will be eligible to take the credit. Avinash bhai?
Yes, absolutely perfect. Now, only thing that I would like to add is for this question also and for the last question that we have addressed also, that we are strictly reading the provisions of 17(5)(c) and D, whereas the courts may read it otherwise also, and they have read it otherwise in case of Odisha High Court in Safari retreats, wherein the credit has been allowed even when it was for the purpose which was falling into 17(5)(c) and D, and they have said that if you are constructing some building which is to be utilized as a mall and on which the output supply of service is going to be there, and the income or the consideration which is against that supply is taxable under GST, so you will have to give credit also. So it is not that 17(5)(c) or 17(5)(d) restricts, and there is no other contrary view. Even as a lawyer, I would also say, even as a student of law, I would say that the provision, if we read the statement of objects, when the GST law was introduced, it was said that there will not be any accumulation of credit and there will not be any cascading impact. So this particular blockage is like, I would say, is against that statement of objects, and therefore it is very well open for being challenged before various courts of law. And maybe in future we'll see that this provision may be read down or struck down by the court of law, as it has been done in case of Odisha High Court in case of Safari retreats by Honorable Odisha High Court. So there is a long way, and this just we have completed 33 months. It's a long way of GST, so a lot of things are going to be changed. But certainly I will not agree with this 17(5) clause D or clause C. But again, I would say we'll have to read it strictly, and therefore need to evaluate what is the impact of it, what is the amount involved. If it is a larger impact, then we should think whether we can afford the litigation, and then we can proceed further. Otherwise not. Otherwise we should strictly follow the provisions, and therefore the credit, whether it is allowable or not, we should consider that.
Okay, sir.
Next.
We are moving forward to the next query. Next query is regarding apportion of a credit and block credits. Suppose a company is a member of a trade association. Will the input tax credit on the subscription or a membership fees paid by such company to the association be available to the company?
No. 17.5 specifically provide that membership of a club or association, any fees paid against that, then no GST credit shall be allowed to you, and it is an absolute blockage of credit, meaning thereby there is no exception. So I would straightforward say that the credit shall not be allowed.
Avinash bhai,
Any other view?
I will just request to Avinash bhai, I will just
boliye.
request to read section 17 subsection 5 B subclause second. Here the association is not included. If you just read out the clause, it is
just a minute.
out only of the club.
No, it speaks about the membership fees of the trade association. It is saying. Okay, wait. Just a minute. Just a minute.
Club, it is saying. Yes.
Okay. So I also mentioned in my answer club or association. Just a minute. 17.5.
B.
Yes.
B section. B का second clause where food and beverages है, उसके बाद उसका provision है, then the membership of health and fitness center.
Membership of a club, health and fitness center. Okay. So in that case, ठीक है. Agar in that case, so if it is a trade association, then certainly the credit can be allowed if I take in that fashion. But in that case, I will be requiring some time because I need to evaluate what is the term club means here, because the term club, so far as my knowledge is concerned, is not defined in the law, and therefore prima facie I would say that yes, since it is not falling in the definition of club, the credit shall be allowed, or it can be allowed, but we'll have to evaluate how the club is envisaged in this law.
Yes,
whether it is
that's
going
the
to
point. That's the point. Yes.
But whether it is going to like include the term association or not. But let me put in this fashion, like in case of members of ICAI, if you are taking the membership of ICAI, the credit is certainly allowed. But a chartered accountant, if he is taking membership of a CP circle and paying some GST to them, whether that credit is allowed, I believe that credit shall also be allowed. But whether a chartered accountant, if he is taking a membership of a association, let's say a builders association, whether that credit will be allowed to the chartered accountant or not, I have my own doubts, and therefore I would say I will refer and do some research on this. But prima facie it appears that club ही इसमें लिया है, association नहीं लिया, and therefore you can take that credit. Ashu bhai, now you can add.
No, that's the point. Only the point is club. How we will take the definition of club. What I see that purpose of section 17.5 subsection 5, because if I see the intention, because they are talking about club, health and fitness center. If I see in totality, what is the intention? These things are used for personal purpose. Like in general parlance, if I talk about the club, that is for entertainment purpose. Health and fitness is that of personal use. But when I'm talking the trade association, that is for the purpose of the business. So what I feel the purpose of this clause of membership of club, fitness and health is just not in consonance with the trade association. So what I personally feel, trade association will not be barred in this particular this set of restriction.
Correct. So prima facie the credit shall be allowed for the subscription or the membership fees.
Okay, we are moving to the next question. Is RCM credit to be claimed in same month?
Yes, it has to be claimed in the same month because see what is basically how we have to see it. Basically, the tax has to be paid by utilization of credit or by way of cash as per section 39, as per section 49, and as per section 39, the tax has to be paid during the with the filing of the return, whatever the due date of filing of return, the tax has to be paid along with that. So there is no restriction to take the credit on the same month itself. There is no bar into the law for that purpose. Avinash, right?
I think they've clarified also this in one of the circulars, I think, wherein they've said कि same month में ले सकते हैं.
Yes, yeah. Because in service tax there was a restriction. Because in service tax we were paying it and when we are taking the next month. But in GST law there is no such restriction for that purpose.
Yeah, moving to the next query.
This way of discussing, I think construction includes reconstruction. This way already.
Okay.
Yes, that are already covered, I think.
Okay, this is regarding e-way. Whether tax paid on the goods which was traveling with the invoice but without e-way bill can be taken as ITC in relation to section 17(5) subclause D and section 129.
17(5)(d), it is already a blocked credit. How you will take credit of that?
I take this question.
Please.
Basically, I think he is confusing certain things. Number one, traveling with IT invoices, but without e-bill. The first thing what we have to see whether the tax has been imposed on in the way under section 129 for the not carrying the e-bill. If that is the case, in that case the credit cannot be taken for the taxes paid under section 129 because on the invoice it has to mention that the tax has been paid under section 129. That is the one thing. The other thing, if it is related with the otherwise the goods have reached, e-bill was not prepared, the penalties can be there, but I think there will be no restriction of taking the credit if the tax has not been required to be under section 129. I think that is the intention of asking the question.
Maybe.
It seems like that, sir.
Yeah.
The next query. A real estate agent pays GST on brokerage received. He has taken a new office where he fits AC in his office. Does tiling and POP work? Whether he will be get ITC?
Yeah, again
Tiling
the
and
question
POP
pertains.
works.
Yeah, again the question pertains to the same construction and on his own account. Now, fitting an AC, I would say fitting an AC certainly you can take credit as it is. It can be equated with the furniture, but then there are like wiring of an AC, जो वो aluminium wires लगाते हैं और आजकल वो ducting वाला चलता है and all those things. In that case, it becomes part of immovable property, and it will have to be seen in the light of circumstances and facts of the case. कि अगर आप एक split AC या window AC लाके लगा रहे हैं, then the credit shall be allowed in that case. Otherwise, अगर आप एक पूरा एक AC का system आप install कर रहे हैं अपनी factory के अंदर या अपने showroom के अंदर, then in that case it becomes part of immovable property. You might recollect that while discussing this provision, I have discussed an example of ceiling which was being created, and then the person has said that will avail credit, will not capitalize it, because construction का जो definition है 17(5)(d) के बाद वो लिखा हुआ है कि उसमें आप capitalize अगर नहीं करते तो credit ले सकते हो, but you need to also pay attention to the accounting policies also and the accounting standards कि वो capitalize करना mandatory है या नहीं है. You cannot just ignore the facts और GST की credit लेने के लिए आप capitalize कर लेंगे या आप income tax को avoid कर देंगे. So as per me, AC you will have to see the facts and circumstances of the cases. If it is a standalone AC जो आप निकाल सकते हो कहीं भी, तो you can take credit of it. Tiling and POP work, as per me, no, because it becomes a service which is or a goods which are certainly in relation to the immovable property, and therefore the credit will not be allowed as per me. 17(5)(d) will block it. आशु भाई कुछ ऐड करना है तो आप कर सकते हैं प्लीज.
Nothing, sir. Perfect.
Next question. The taxpayer has paid output tax on supply of goods and services. However, such supply lead to bad debts as the recipient got bankrupt. Can the taxpayer reclaim such tax on output supply, or it will be fall under section 17(5), that is lost goods?
I think question is somewhat unrelated. Number one, there is no provision for the relief for bad debts. I think Indian GST law there is no provision. Though in the European VAT, if we see the UAE VAT law, they have given the relief if the something become bad debts. But there is no provision as such into the GST law. Number one. Number two, when you have supplied the goods, there is no question of section 17 subsection 5. section 17 subsection 5 is applicable when the goods are with me or I lost the goods. Here I have supplied the goods. There is no question of losing the goods or destruction of the goods. So I think section 17.5 is not be applicable if I am able to correct it. I am able to understand it correctly. Supply has already been done. Invoice has already been issued. The only thing I am not receiving the payment. So I think there is no restriction as 17.5 is not applicable here, and no relief for the bad debts will be available here to me.
Correct.
Okay, we are going to the next question. What should be the basic value product manufacturer for which reversal of tax is required supplied as free samples under section 17.5H? Whether it should be cost plus for some markup?
See, at the time of discussion also, and I would like to have the comments from Ashu bhai also. Now, at the time of discussion, I have already said that I have a different interpretation of this particular provision so far as samples is concerned. To my view, sample is something in case I am dealing with those goods as a trader. If I purchase something and gives that product to someone else as a sample to be used, in that case the credit reversal is required or the blockage of credit is there. But if I am a manufacturer, if I am procuring raw material for producing something, then the credit of raw material cannot be reversed because the final product I am giving for sampling. जैसे मेडिकल कंपनीज हैं, फार्मा कंपनीज है, वो अपनी मेडिसिन बनाती हैं और वो कुछ डॉक्टर्स को सैंपल के लिए देती हैं. So as per my view, that is not a sample which they mean and they wanted to cover under section 17.5 clause H, and therefore the credit shall not be reversed in those cases. To be simple and precise, this is my answer. Otherwise बहुत सारे arguments हैं, we can keep on arguing that. आशु भाई आप ऐड करो इसमें, क्योंकि I think there is a circular also and there is some clarification with relation to this so far as government is concerned. तो आप इसको ऐड करेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा. मैंने तो अपना व्यू बता दिया कि बहुत stringent व्यू है.
बेसिकली मैं बात करूं सर्कुलर की, तो सर्कुलर तो वो ये है कि आप एक सामान के साथ 1+1 दे रहे हैं, उसकी बात करता है. वो कहता है वैल्यू दोनों की मिला के हो जाएगी. It is not the situation like pharma company are giving samples to the doctor, giving to the doctors, and they are not giving further medicine to the doctors. That means doctors को तो they are giving to promote their medicine. You take few samples and you recommend it to your patients, and they will purchase it from the medical shop. So that for that purpose, I think circular is not there. Circular is only when you are actually supplying the goods. Along with that, you are supplying, giving some free material with that. So they are saying the total value becomes 1. Now coming to this part 17.5H, I agree with Avinash bhai that is the intention of the law, but the point is wordings are different, because wordings are goods lost, destroyed or disposed by your gift. Gift is fine. The gift is when it is not related to my manufacturing product or the products are not mine. But when I talking for the free sample, I think sample, when I take the word sample. Sample is possible only when I am dealing in certain thing. Because if I am giving the sample to somebody, it means I am giving it to induce him to purchase my goods or induce him to purchase or to promote my goods. So that means what I pursue, sample is possible only when you are dealing in certain particular those products. So what I vouch, what the Avinash bhai is saying, that is the intention of law. There is no doubt about it. But if you go for the wordings, obviously department will go for the reversal of credit of those samples also practically. Though when Avinash bhai will go in the high court, the high court will be taking the view what the Avinash bhai is saying. I agree with that. But when we go on the practical grounds, till I think to the commissioner level things, they will not agree they will not be able to differentiate between the sample, what is intended into the law and what the sample they are doing. So from that perspective, to some extent I will agree with Avinash bhai, but from practical point of view, department will not take that view on ground when they will be doing your audits, then they will be doing your assessment.
Correct.
Okay. Should we move to the next query? Okay. This is regarding eligible and condition for taking ITC. In case of retail mall, there is a theft which is difficult to locate as the person deals in more than 30,000 products. How will he pay GST on stolen goods as there is no easy mechanism to locate the theft?
What I will, Praveen, I think it is a Praveen question. What I can say, it is a very hypothetical question, because I can vouch in 2002 we were dealing with a retail store more than 1 lakh products, and when we are talking of such big retail store, they have the system where they by able to identify offer small items also. Number one, that is a practical aspect. Number two, when I talk about the GST law is very clear. You have to maintain the stock record. There is no exception for that. Number three, even if you are not able to identify the stock which have been stolen, in that case, you have to create certain grounds on the basis of valuation will be done. How that valuation will be done without knowing the existing product. It will not be the only question into the GST law. How you will do the accounting also, that will also be important, because some basis of the valuation has to be brought in. Some basis of parameter on practical grounds, either through stock take or some other way, it has to be done, because for accounting also you have to recognize the loss, and if you have taken the insurance for that, you have to evaluate what the loss has been done. It is not only about the question of the GST. I think number one, it has to be evaluated. Either I cannot evaluate exact loss of the goods which has been lost. I have to create some mechanism through which some approximations can be done based on some linking process. What type of products has been lost? What can be probability of losing the goods? So some approximation has to be done. We cannot say we cannot determine what is the value of loss. Avinash bhai?
Agreed. And plus, there is no exception in GST law also.
Yes.
If you are required to maintain the stock as per 35(1), you will have to maintain it.
And even we are saying when 30,000 plus products are there, how the company can run without maintaining the stock? It is not possible at all. What I personally feel.
I agree.
Okay, we are moving to the next question now. A registered person is electric contractor. That is, he
We have
fits
answered.
electric.
Amish bhai, we have already answered this question, because ये AC और वो जो tiling वगैरह का है ना, वही question है. So it will be a construction, and therefore the credit shall not be allowed, as per me. And this is a works contract service. Certainly, it is a works contract service because it is pertaining to the immobile property.
Okay. Then we are. I think this one is also we have done. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is regarding value of taxable supply. What should be the value of supply in which there is no consideration?
I think it's very clear that section 15 subsection 4 says जहाँ पे आपका consideration हो, वो transaction value कब नहीं बनेगा, whenever there is a violation of either of the two conditions, that is the person is related or the amount which is being paid is not the sole consideration. Now you are asking a question wherein there is no consideration and still the supply is there. It means the entries of schedule 1. So as per my belief, it depends again on facts. Like let me put an example. When you are making a supply from one branch to the other branch, it is generally a supply which is not having any price attached to it or the consideration attached to it, but still by virtue of schedule 1 it will be considered as a supply, and therefore the question of valuation will arise. And we have discussed this issue also at length कि जनरली क्या करोगे आप, शेड्यूल आप रूल 28 देखेंगे, उसका सेकंड प्रोविजन बोलता है कि इन केस there is a supply by between the distinct persons, then in that case whatever value you will put in invoice will be considered as the value of goods. It will be considered as the market value of the goods. But I suggested at that point of discussion and that point of time that at least you should transfer or you should invoice to that extent what is your cost. जितना आपका cost है, at least उतनी value तक का आप billing करेंगे, that is the right way of doing it. Otherwise the value of supply determination has the rules specified wherein it will start from rule 27 जहाँ पे multiple considerations होते हैं, sole नहीं होता. Rule 28 will be applicable in this case when a distinct person is being supplying to another distinct person and where there is no involvement of any agent. So please refer rule number 28. That will be giving you the answer how to determine the value of supply in case there is no consideration. Anything to be added, Ashu bhai?
But only just I will summarize in two parts. Number one, if it is, though you have explained it very well. Number one, if it is not related party, then it will not be supply at all. There is no need to of doing this. It will not be supply and it will not be valuation will not be required. If it is a related party or distinct person, then as you correctly said, we have to go to the rule 28. That is a crisp answer for that purpose.
Okay.
This also
Now-
has been discussed. Plant or machinery. Where
Plant
is
or
the
machinery,
explanation?
where
Plant
is
or
I think it has been covered in detail. I think you can skip further.
Okay. Now we are moving to the next one. In case of real estate development, developer received an advance from customer and executed a sale deed of a property after 1 or 2 years. So till that time, whether we have to consider the same amount as advance. Another question is whether developer required to prepare or provide any invoice to the customer. If invoice is required, then when they prepare the invoice, that is date of sale deed or date of receipt of the advances. 1/3 abatement given for land portion. So whether we have to show the same on as non-GST supply in return. I think 2 or 3 questions are mixed in this.
Yeah, I just we break into the two part.
Yes.
First of all,
Okay.
what we have to understand for the time of supply provisions for the section 13, time of supply of service is dependent upon issuance of the tax invoice as per section 31. Section 31 tax invoice has two specific things. I have to identify whether the supply of services is on continuous basis, whether it is a continuous supply or one-time supply. When we talk about the continuous supply, section 2 subsection 33 defines what is the continuous supply of services. For that purpose, if something is provided on continuously or recurrent basis, then it is a continuous supply of services and it is for 3 months. And when we talk about the continuous supply of services, there are 2 parameters of issuing the invoice, or 3 parameters of issuing the invoice, tax invoice. Number 1, what is the what is the due date of payment in the agreement? What is the due date of when the actual amount is received, or when the invoicing is linked with a certain happening of a certain event. So what happens in the real estate transactions, invoicing is dependent upon the slabs which is done. For example, initial 10% is written, then after first slab 20%, third slab certain percentage, and after 15 slab certain percentage. So here the tax invoice has to be raised as soon as that event is completed, as soon as the first, third, or fifth, or 15th slab is completed. So here the completion of flat has not to be waited upon. As per section 31, as soon as the event is completed, against which the invoice has to be received to be issued, that means the payment has to be received. In that case, that is the time of supply for that purpose. That is the first part. That means whatever the event mentioned in on what basis the agreement has been written. In real estate, there can be 2 ways. One way can be, I can say ki I will take first payment after 6 months, second payment after 1 year, third payment after 1.5 years. When periodic payments are mentioned into the agreement, then the date of those periodic payment will become the time of supply and will become the date of issue of tax invoice. If the invoice or payment is linked with the happening of certain event, then that event will become the date of issuing the tax invoice and date of issuing of the time of supply. So that is very clear. We have not to wait till the registry has been done. I have to see what is the milestone mentioned into the agreement, that will become the time of supply. That is the first part. Second part, what is the 1/3 abatement given the land portion? So when we are saying the land abatement, that means I'm selling the property of, let's say, 15 lakh. 1/3 is giving the land abatement. That is the valuation is done for 10 lakh rupees. That means it is not the non-GST supply. The valuation is changed.
Correct.
That means when I have shown to my GST return, I have to show the value. My invoice value of the 15 lakh, but my taxable value will be 10 lakhs. 10 lakh will go into my GST returns. There is no GST supply or nothing like that. It will be only my taxable value will become 10 lakh because the rebate is given under section 15 in that way purpose. Avinash, if you want to add something, please.
No. Sufficiently answered. It has been very detailed answer.
Okay, we are moving to the next question now. Sir, whether ITC on demo car will be available or not. If not, on what ground? On what grounds? As it is being used for the business, and the registered person is in a business of supplying a motor vehicle, which is an exception.
Again, I would say at the time of discussion also, I have discussed this example, and very recently I came across this practical problem, and I would like to mention that what kind of problem was there. See, different companies have different compulsions. Like if I speak about Hyundai, it may require the vehicle to be registered, which is being used as a demo vehicle. Whereas if I speak about, this is just a hypothetical example, you just quote, you should not quote anywhere. In case of Toyota, let's say they do not have any such requirement. So what will happen if I go for registration of a vehicle? Then they will ask that who is the person who is purchasing this vehicle, and therefore it cannot be registered in the name of the company which is going to sell it. So that is a practical problem. That is a practical problem. In case the registration of vehicle is not required as per the mandate of that company, then in that case there is no problem at all. जो आप demo vehicle use कर रहे हैं, that will be a part of your stock only, and therefore you can avail the credit thereof. But जहाँ पे आपका रजिस्टर कराना है, वहां पे अगर आप कंपनी के नाम से रजिस्टर करा रहे हैं या आप किसी थर्ड पर्सन के नाम से रजिस्टर करा रहे हैं, so many companies what they are doing is they are getting it registered in the name of a new company, and from that new company they are taking it on hire. That demo vehicle they are taking on hire in the original company, और वहां से वो उसकी क्रेडिट भी ले पा रहे हैं और उसको यूज कर पा रहे हैं. फाइनली जब वो सेल हो रहा है, जब डेमो व्हीकल सेल हो रहा है, तो फिर उसको ट्रेडिंग में दिखा के उसकी क्रेडिट ले लेते हैं. सो अकॉर्डिंगली दे हैव प्लान्ड दिस. बट if you ask me a straightforward answer, then see what is demo car. To my understanding, demo car is nothing but a stock that you retain for certain period, and after that period you sell it off at a lower value or higher value, whatever, depending on the conditions of the vehicle. To my view and as per my clear understanding, even a demo vehicle should be eligible for input tax credit for the dealer of the vehicle. For the dealer of the vehicle, if he is using that a vehicle which is a part of his trading stock in the demo, then certainly the credit should be allowed. But practically these are the issues कि company बोलती है you have to register the demo vehicle before you move that vehicle out of your showroom for the customers to do the demo run. So if that is the condition, then the answer will change, and then you need to plan it accordingly so that the credit also can be availed, and as well as the non-compliance also does not happen from your end so far as GST is concerned. But prima facie, primarily, yes, the credit of demo car should be allowed as per my views. Ashu, you add please.
Numbers perfectly, sir.
Okay, then we are going to the next question. This is regarding value of taxable supply. If a factory provides a canteen facility to its employee owing to the requirement of the Factories Act and records half of the cost from employees, how would the outward supply be valued? First, transaction value is 50% of the cost, or will have to go to the valuation rules as employer and employees are related person as per section 15.
Basically, I will take into two parts. First, we will try to understand whether it is a supply or not. First, we have to understand. I will discuss advanced ruling and also come into that way, but we will take in later part. But the first part is we take practical example. ITC, let's say we take certain company. Adani Group has maintained a factory and there is a canteen into it. Canteen is providing food to the employees, and when I am providing the food, I have written into my terms of employment that you will provide a canteen into my premises, and only 50% of the cost will be recovered for that canteen. So my question is, when I am providing the canteen facility to the employees, as per terms of employment, whether that will be supply or not? That is the first question we have to, I think, determine. in my understanding, if something is provided in terms of employment and that is included into the perquisite of that employee, then that is outward, that is not the supply at all. The 50% I am charging to recover the cost, that is my after terms of contract, that will not be supply at all, that will become my salary, employee salary. I think that is my understanding. If something is not the terms of employment, that means that is not included into the perquisite of the employee, and I think practically that is not possible. As far as little knowledge of the income tax is concerned, nothing can be left out of the perquisite if something is paid to the employees directly or indirectly. But in hypothetical case we take, it is not the part of the employment and that is not taken into perquisite, then it becomes a supply, and in that case the taxability will arise and the valuation has to be done as per rule 28 or whatever the related party transaction has to be there, because in that case the 50% recovery will not be material. In that case we have to do the valuation as per rule 28, cost plus 10% of those methods which has to apply or the market related, that has to be seen. So in my opinion, first has to be determined whether it is to be supply or not. If we determine it is not the supply, there is no question of valuation, there is no question of taxability. But if we determine it is a supply, then the valuation will be done, and in that case 50% recovery is not material in that case, because the employer and employee are related person, and for that purpose rule 28 has to be seen. But I will draw your attention in an advance ruling for that purpose, because we can refer that where the taxability has been held. I think that advance ruling was in Caltech Polymer Private Limited in 2018. Even the appellate authority has also upheld that decision, where they have held that tax has to be paid on the canteen supply. That is my view.
Agreed.
Avinash bhai?
Agreed. Yes, correct. I agree.
Okay.
And since it is also mentioned that it is within the requirements of factory side, then the question of blockage of credit does not arise. So even you will be allowed to take the credit also.
No, here it is not a question of ITC. Here
I
it is a question ki tax has to be charged or not.
I'm adding. Yes, I understand that.
Okay, now we are moving to the next question. Do you agree with one advance ruling where input was not allowed for construction and repairs of guest house? Won't it fall in such goods or services fall in course of furtherance of business 17(5)(b), and hence should credit be allowed?
See, Shubhamji, so far as my what I can say view is concerned, I never read any advance rulings. Personally, अगर मैं बोलूँ तो I never go through, I never rely on any advance ruling. So it is not that I agree or I disagree with the advance ruling. I don't find it like viable to read it and involve my time there. Now, so far as the view in this question is concerned, I do not know what the advance ruling have said, whether they have allowed the input, they have not allowed as you have written. But if we take the example of Safari Retreat that I have covered just now, Safari Retreat, they have allowed it. They have allowed it because that was to be used as a mall. And now it is, the question is pertaining to usage as a guest house. If it is to be used as a guest house and you believe that this is in course or furtherance of business, still I would say you will have to be very vigilant and you will have to be very choosy in deciding whether to avail that credit or not. It depends on the, again, the quantum of that credit which you are supposed to take, and in case you are losing that credit, that what is going to happen. But prima facie, reading the strict lines of the law, the credit shall not be allowed. The credit shall not be allowed as per my views also, even if it is being used for your business purpose. But सफारी रेटेड का कॉग्निजेंस लेके अगर आप गेस्ट हाउस है और उसमें आप चार्ज करने वाले हैं, then you can take the benefit of that ruling and accordingly you can take the credit and then be ready for the future expected litigations, which I would say that is bound to come. Ashu bhai, anything to be added?
No, nothing. Yeah, it's fine, sir.
Yes, next question,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, we are dealing with the next question. This is regarding eligibility and condition for taking ITC. The query is regarding bill of goods, that is cement, which is used for construction, for used both for construction and repairs, but the same cannot be segregated. Whether ITC available on repairs portion calculated at year end?
I think if we do that, we have to pay the interest on that. There is no, what is my understanding, there is no asset provision where I can postpone the things for the year end. That is my understanding. Avinash bhai?
Agreed. For credit, you cannot postpone. Like, it has to be time bound.
Okay. Next question, please. This is regarding value of taxable supply. Section 15, subsection 5. In case of builder, there is a provision of 80% to be purchased from registered dealer. How and when shall we check that on monthly basis, annual basis? Practically, how to do that?
Although I may not be the right person to answer this, Ashubai will be the right person, but I will just add my view and then I'll hand it over to Ashubai. And my view is that so far as I remember, this notification is pertaining to the procurements. If you have procure 80% minimum from the registered person, then only that benefit of 5% leviability is available to me. At the same time, if you do not procure minimum 80% from the registered person, then the reverse charge is applicable to you. Now, in my humble view, it has to be calculated on monthly basis or the period which is applicable to you. Let's say जैसे अभी शायद 5 करोड़ का लिमिट आने वाला है, 5 करोड़ में आप क्वार्टरली भरेंगे, तो अगर 5 करोड़ का आपका है उसके नीचे और आपको क्वार्टरली टैक्स पीरियड है आपका, तो आप टैक्स पीरियड के हिसाब से, so whatever is your tax period, if it is monthly then it has to go monthly, if it is quarterly then it has to go quarterly, but you need to calculate as per your tax period and pay accordingly. That is my view, not annually. Ashubai, you add into this because
no, we can move forward, no issue. We can move ahead.
So I believe Amish bhai will take this as the last question of the day.
Yes,
and then I have one announcement to make. We'll make that announcement and close it. And as we have already committed, rest of the queries will be replied back.
Okay. This is regarding apportion of a credit and block credits. Sir, is ITC eligible for the insurance paid related to workman compensation policy and second, keyman insurance policy?
I think there is no restriction as such for these two policies. If I read section 17, subsection 5, there is no restriction on workman compensation policy or keyman insurance policy. And I think for their purpose, service tax law, there was some case law also where they have been allowed for the keyman insurance policy for that purpose. Avinash bhai, if you want to add something, I think there is no restriction as such.
Only thing that I would like to add is, like, we need to evaluate it also whether it is falling within that definition which we have read just now. The club health, what was that? Health insurance and some other insurance was there. So if it is not falling within that purview, then certainly the credit will be allowed.
Basically, and what it says, yes.
Over and above that, I think workman compensation policy is also mandated under a statute. तो उसका तो credit मिलेगा ही मिलेगा. There is no question about it. Keyman insurance policy, I think it depends on the company which is taking it for the purpose of securing their losses or their revenues. Losses I would say, but basically. तो मेरे हिसाब से कीमैन इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी में शायद we'll have to evaluate, but in case of workman compensation policy, yes, I think the credit should be allowed.
Because the point is the restriction is on the life insurance policy and the health policy.
हाँ, तो that will not fall. कीमैन इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी वहाँ नहीं आएगा. Yes, correct. कीमैन इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी वहाँ पे नहीं फॉल करेगा, तो उसको मिलना चाहिए फिर.
Yes, basically if I take in that way, basically my insurance are of 3 types. Practically, if I see from the insurance point of view, one is general insurance, one is health insurance, and one is the life insurance. If I am doing the general insurance, and I think these two insurance are covered into general insurance, they are not the life insurance, because when I see the life insurance and health insurance, because the GST law is not defining what is the health insurance or what is the life insurance, these terms has to be seen as per the Insurance Regulatory Development Act. And when in insurance in that act, my insurance are of 3 categories: life, general, and health. So my restriction is on the life and health, and for general insurance it is applicable for the motor vehicle. General insurance is restriction is applicable for motor vehicle. So what I feel, if what is I personally know, workman compensation policy and keyman insurance policies falls under general insurance, and they will not be per se covered to health and life insurance. That is my understanding.
Correct. So friends, I think we have tried to cover as many as question as possible, and there are 2 announcements to be made today.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. एक
बोलिए ना।
लास्ट एक खाली क्वेश्चन रह गया था that what is the logic for GSTR1 date extended to 11th from 10th? That
Yeah, this question has
आपने
been
मुझे
asked.
रिमाइंड कर
Correct. This question has been asked from me at various times. आशु भाई जस्ट आप भी अपना ऐड करना। एक लॉजिक है लाइक rule 61 sub rule 5 which says that there has to be an extension in the due date of filing GSTR1 and GSTR2, then only GSTR3B can be filed. That is what is provided under rule 61 sub rule 5. Now as when we read section 37, it says GSTR1 has to be filed, that is a prescribed form, by the 10th of next month. तो जब मैं ये सेक्शन डिस्कस कर रहा था तो आई शेयर्ड विद द पार्टिसिपेंट्स कि अब आप देखोगे तो GSTR1 का डेट 10 तारीख से 11 तारीख किया गया है। उसका लॉजिक क्या है, दैट आई विल ट्राई टू एक्सप्लेन। सो दिस इज द क्वेश्चन, व्हाट इज द लॉजिक? तो एज पर मी द लॉजिक इज just to enable the provisions of rule 61(5) and just to enable the filing of GSTR3B, they have extended the date of GSTR1 by 1 day. Otherwise there is no logic behind it. वो 10 तारीख अगर वो रखते हैं, so it means it is not complying with 61(5). 61(5) बोलता है the due date has to be extended for GSTR1, and therefore for extending and for making the GSTR3B eligible to be filed legally, otherwise हम जैसे लॉयर तो वहां जाके खड़े हो जाएंगे कोर्ट में कि 10 तारीख की डेट है तो GSTR1 की डेट ही नहीं बढ़ी तो आपने कैसे 3B को अलाउ कर दिया। So for that purpose they have increased the date from 10th to 11th, एक दिन इंक्रीज कर दिया। It is not for the purpose of taxpayers, it is for the purpose of enabling the rule which they have inserted as a backdoor entry. That is my logic. आशु कुछ आपको कुछ ऐड करना हो तो?
ना भाई, ये वकील वाला बिल्कुल सही आपका मामला है।
So that is my logic कि उन्होंने वो इनेबल करने के लिए इसको किया है, अदरवाइज फिर वो वहीं पे वो पूरी तरीके से फेल हो जाते। Anyways, पहला announcement I will repeat for the participants because आज number of participants are very less, and I will be requesting कि जिनकी queries नहीं है at least they should also attend. Although we have committed, I think we have done a mistake by committing that we will be sharing the written answers of all those queries, and therefore they are not attending. Anyways, no problem at all. The announcement is that one, we are starting the series on case laws from 1st May. That is the announcement which I have already done, and the forms will be given and the detail will be given by tomorrow. And from tomorrow, the second announcement is from tomorrow the timing of the sessions will be 5 to 7 p.m. We will not be continuing with 6 to 8. Now it is going to be 5 to 7 p.m. And I would like to thank Ashu for helping me out because I was not well today, and he has taken, at the very last moment I called him and he agreed to be part of this question answer sessions. So I'm extremely thankful to him, although he's a part of me only because we are partners and we are associated since long. So great thank to the to Ashu and to the entire team. And nevertheless, over and above everything, to all the participants who have attended this query session and made this series successful, I am thankful to each one of you. Thank you, friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.